In this episode of We Do a Little, we are joined by Will Price. Will is a true crypto OG, a relatively big brain Noobs enthusiast, and your favorite influencer's favorite influencer. We go deep on Will's intro to crypto, the most interesting times in crypto so far, a bunch of mechanism design, the lendiness of eating bugs, and so much more. As always, this podcast is for entertainment purposes only and should not be relied upon for investment decisions. Andy, B's, and guests may own NFTs discussed.
This is Andy.
Yeah, I'm Bruce.
Welcome everyone to another episode of We Do a Little. Today we're joined by Will Price, who I think is the most popular, not popular person on Twitter, is my hot take for his account. Will's awesome. He's a great friend. Big brain, bigger heart.
Well, thank you for the warm.
Your favorite
welcome.
favorite person.
Happy to be here, although I'm not quite sure what that means.
I don't know.
What is a popular, non-popular person?
I feel like your Twitter account's like pretty low key, but like really, really high signal to noise ratio of like followers and people who do interact with you on Twitter. Like you don't, like you could very much so in another world, I feel like, have 200,000 followers on Twitter and be like tweeting long bullshit threads about like governance or DeFi or different things.
Geez, what does it feel like to have 200,000 followers on Twitter?
Overwhelming.
Overwhelming?
Yeah, I didn't plan any of this.
Overwhelming good? Overwhelming?
It's a mixture. It oscillates. Sometimes it feels really good and sometimes it feels really bad. I would say overall, I mean, the benefits outweigh the negatives, but it's a whole bunch of negatives you don't really think of when you have a small follower account, like having to bite your tongue on certain things or censor yourself a little more.
I think it was Dan Robinson that had a tweet at one point, maybe last year, where it talked about ideal Twitter strategy for a certain number of follower accounts. And I think something around 10K was the peak shitposting zone.
Yeah.
And that's where I'd like to stay.
Yeah, it's where you get like good engagement, but no one's like really a reply guy yet.
25K is where it gets shit for me. Like that was where I turned DMs off. I had to follow you to get a DM around 25K. It was just like, fuck this.
I'm just waiting for CZ to become my reply guy.
Yeah, I mean, that'd be kind of fun. I feel like he's someone who's like, I'm always like really interested by the like crazy founder person Twitter. Of like him and like Justin from Tron, and I don't know. I feel like sometimes even SBF kind of gets into this world of like just like tweeting kind of crazy things sometimes, or like interesting takes. I don't know, like what it must be like kind of weird. Like I wonder how much CZ thinks about his Twitter account, or if he's just like sending off crazy shit and doesn't really care.
I feel like he thinks about it more than
but he's just worth like. I guess in my head, there's like a number where when you have that much money, you don't care about your Twitter anymore.
I mean, look at someone like Kobe. I mean, he's not worth as much as CZ, but like you could give Kobe $1 trillion and he's going to care more about how people think on Twitter.
Yeah, that's true.
So, I mean, like there's certain people, they just love the game of Twitter, I think. Well,
as a Twitter feed scrolling enthusiast, I just enjoy the authentic, sometimes frenetic energy that various people put out into the world.
What are some of your favorite follows under like 10,000 followers?
Oh gosh. So not to get too deep into the backstory, but my first job in crypto was in data science. And I think that some of the highest alpha to follower ratio people are all Dune Wizards.
Yeah.
So people who get into the weeds, reviewing, smart contract event histories, aggregating all of that up and generating pretty pictures for people to look at.
Yeah. The Dune Wizard like little group of people is like pretty insane. And like we had someone with the Noumlets on today who within 20 minutes was like, DM me, hey man, made a Dune dashboard for you. Let me know what you think. And I was like, oh, sick. Like I wasn't going to do this. I'm glad you did. But yeah. And it's interesting too, because it'd be really interesting if there was some way to monetize like making really good Dune dashboards other than getting a job at Nansen.
Or plugging an address that says, like, if you like my work, feel free to donate.
So I think there is.
Yeah.
And most of it comes through reputation building.
Mm-hmm.
Dune does a really great job of surfacing new, interesting, trending dashboards.
Mm-hmm.
And if you make high quality output, then people will notice and they'll show up in your DMs and maybe including me.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, it's almost like a really weird like social media platform for crypto.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing about it that I think I'd like to see improved is some sort of quality control, at least on the popular dashboards, because unless you go in and you are able to read SQL, at least if not write it, and validate that a query is properly constructed, you have no real way of knowing whether the information provided is accurate. So maybe there's some sort of dashboard extractable value that we'll see at some point. Who knows? Yeah.
No, that's a good point. I've seen that too with like looking at like marketplace volumes and different things like that, where it's like you can definitely take something as a source of truth and then be like, oh, well, actually, it's just like all wash trading, and they just didn't filter out the wash trading.
Yeah, I mean, it's I haven't seen it ever done in a malicious number massaging way, but for example, there was a popular OpenSea dashboard that was built before the rise of aggregators like Genie, Gem, Blur, etc. And I think it was double counting volume from aggregators with the methodology of the query, which was perfectly valid methodology before a new and unexpected way to buy NFTs arose, and it got patched later. And then sometimes there's information that you might not be able to get from like purely on-chain events and logs, like which front end submitted this transaction, and unless there's some sort of like data tagging methodology. An efficient aggregator might just send a transaction directly to OpenSea to make a purchase, for example.
I saw that they just did something about that, right? Where now Gem is attaching like some stuff to the end of their seaport fills.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's happening as of this week, which should make it a little bit easier to tell who's the top of the funnel.
Yeah. I mean, it makes sense. From what I had seen, it seemed like Gem was generally being underreported as far as its volume previously.
It's just such a better UX to use an aggregator than to use a independent marketplace. I have to think that the reason for the Gem acquisition in the case of OpenSea and the reason for the Genie acquisition in the case of Uniswap is so that they can have the best chance of owning the top of the funnel. And if you can have proprietary liquidity, like OpenSea has Seaport, who knows what Uniswap will have, if anything, but you can once you have the users, nudge them towards using your order book or whatever it might be.
Yeah. I'm curious to see how that like plays out long term, where it's like theoretically the aggregator is like, I guess I'm struggling to figure out how aggregators monetize, and like, maybe it's just trying to nudge people to use your your order book, but like even that, if you nudge just like the slightest bit too much, then there will just be another aggregator that doesn't nudge people or like is totally unopinionated. And I have to imagine that they would start to then see that the volume that the aggregator was like originally seeing. I don't know.
So MetaMask Swap Router has been able to charge what I consider absurdly large fees for over a year. And I don't think it's entirely due to airdrop farming, or it would have dried up long ago.
Yeah.
And so I think people are willing to pay for UX, or if that's not exactly the case, they are willing to pay for not needing to develop a new habit once they've found a solution that works for them.
It's like the people who still use Coinbase to buy crypto. Like the fees using the Coinbase app are so ridiculous versus if you go to like Coinbase Pro or FTX US or like literally any other place but Coinbase, but they still go to it because it's comfortable. And it's like, I feel like that's how OpenSea has retained such a big share. It's like, it's just comfortable to so many people and they just use it.
So for the first 3 years of my journey as a, crypto plebe, I was using the Coinbase retail app to make my purchases.
How long did it take you to look at the fees? 3 years? Or
yeah, probably about 3 years. I think I bought my first Bitcoin at the day after the exact top of the 2013 bubble. Nice. It dropped almost 50%. Bought a Bitcoin, felt like a genius, and watched it slowly decay for the next 2 years.
I wish I was around for those early years of pain, and I've only been around for the current years of pain. And
did you get glued immediately, or did it take a few years to, like 3 years, to really start caring?
Is this the crypto rabbit hole question?
Yeah, just curious.
Sure.
Well, so I think my first exposure to the idea of crypto was a Wired article in 2011 about how the experiment had failed. And although I didn't agree with the conclusion, I thought the article was extremely well written, and I started to read more and more about the underlying technology and mix of technologies. And back in college, I was a semi-active online poker player. And
many such cases
in crypto. I wouldn't say I was on the level of some other people, but it was definitely much more than an amateur. And one day I discovered that the U.S. government had shut down all the online poker sites in the U.S. and had the better part of my net worth frozen for over 2 years. So you could say I was predisposed to understanding the initial use case.
I feel like that's a pretty common story for the poker crowd.
How did you get into playing poker?
Originally, just a group of friends in high school as a social activity. And then I was never really a big gamer. I did a little bit of strategy games in high school, but either just because it wasn't around or I was busy with other stuff, it wasn't like a big part of my consciousness. But I really found the incomplete information game to be uniquely compelling, and the game being distilled down to its math and probability elements in its purest form in the online sense was like a completely different experience than sitting around the table with your homies. Yeah, and I found that to be fascinating as well.
And so, were you like one of the guys who was playing like 7 tables at a time and like kind of playing a bunch, or were you like a 1 table guy?
It depended on what I was doing. So I think I had the most fun when I was in the like 1 to 4 tables range. But sometimes it's just fun to get as much dopamine into your system as quickly as possible. But you're not maximizing your learning when you're doing that. You're basically mechanical turking it.
Yeah, you just have some like relative algorithm of what you're doing and just kind of executing on that.
Exactly.
Poker's a lot of fun. I like playing poker.
When did you realize that you were very good at math and thinking and probabilities?
I've always been good at pattern recognition.
Just always a thing. Like, I'm always curious. Like, I was somebody growing up where like the first few years of my life, I thought I was good at math. And then like when I got to middle school, I realized like I fucking suck at math. And then like I automatically biased myself into not learning as much as I should because I thought I was bad at it. And it kind of like prohibited me from learning it for a bit till I got into crypto and I had to teach myself like basic shit. But I feel like a lot of the gigabrains we talk to just have this innate understanding of math, probabilities, like fucking Tarun talking about theoretical physics and shit. Like, it blows my mind. And I'm just curious, like, how the fuck do you guys get that smart? Or were you just born with it? Like, what happened?
So, I'm definitely not like Tarun in the sense that I like to look at these things empirically rather than theoretically. Like, I'm happy to immerse myself in the weeds of new and interesting technologies, but I have a little bit of an aversion to Greek letters.
Like the symbols.
Fair. But I'm just always very interested in, and I have always been interested in systems. And one of the best ways to understand systems is to like poke and prod at them until you've like basically experienced all the possible states that they can be in. And even if that's not normal operation, then I guess, for example, let's say that you have a hobby that's homebrewing beer. You can do everything exactly perfectly and get some, good tasting beer, and that can be the end of it. Or you can do things incorrectly and have a few bottles blow up in your face, or have a few skunked bottles, and you learn a lot more about the underlying.
Yeah. And then maybe you end up with some like really good beer that's slightly off the beaten path of how you would normally get there.
Yeah. I might even go further and say, a large amount of human ingenuity over the centuries has come from like random perturbations that happen by accident.
Do you have any examples of like particular things that you?
Yeah, I mean, I guess the classical example is, vulcanized rubber, right? Happened because of a failed laboratory experiment.
I had no idea.
Yeah.
Today I learned.
The classic example that I've never heard of.
Classic vulcanized rubber.
Yeah, classics. Invented by Vulcans.
Wait, so what was the failed experiment? Like, what were they trying to do with rubber that they ended up accidentally making vulcanized rubber? Do we know? Or do you know?
I think we know collectively as human society, but I have no clue.
Okay, fair. Shit, what was I going to ask? I forget. Jeez.
I don't even, I'm not even sure I know what vulcanized rubber means versus real rubber. Like, what's the difference between rubber and vulcanized rubber? I don't know.
I think we're going to be better off going down a different thread.
Yeah. All right. We can go to nouns. Like, we can always talk about nouns. Hold
on. Let's talk a little bit more about crypto stuff. So you were playing poker. Did you ever do like the DFS world? I feel like most people, it's online poker, DFS, crypto.
No, I skipped that part of the trajectory completely.
Okay. Yeah, I played a little bit of online poker, but I was not good. But DFS was the one that I was fine at. It was better than average, but like not good enough where I could have done it for a living and like done really well. Like not like the Peter Jennings and Adam Levitin and all those guys who like were winning millions of dollars. But that was a fun one because it was like slightly opinionated, where like I was doing it mostly for NBA, and basically, you know, everyone would have their own like algorithm and kind of like the way that they would generally project like basically every player stat per minute they play. And then you would have this very opinionated piece of it which was projecting every player's minutes for the night. And so that was always kind of fun because it was very, very much like doing it live every day, where half an hour before the game start, you're like waiting and reading injury reports and like trying to figure out, okay, who's going to be like who's playing, who's like has some particular matchup now that's changed because their backup center is out for the night. But that one is always, it made a lot of sense to me. Like those things always like overlapped with crypto just because of like, it's people who are really happy to take like strange risks that most of society would be like, wait, what the fuck are you doing?
Grind. Like the NBA is a grind. That is every single day. Like, I mean, I'm not sure that some people only would grind the bigger slate. Some people are doing the 3-game slate. Some people are doing like every slate imaginable. And that shit is rough because you're sitting there, you're looking for late swap contingencies every fucking night because like there might be a player in the 10:30 game who might be out, and like there is the cheapest dude who you need to fucking have if he's out. So you're waiting, and if he's not out, you have to have a player to swap to last minute. And you spend all night on this shit. Like it almost ruined my relationship with my wife at the time because I was just doing it. Like I'd go to work at school, and while I was at work, I'd have my projections ready. I would just basically take projections from a site and then tweak it to my bias because I wasn't doing all the math myself. I don't know how to make a spreadsheet with all the model shit. I'll just jack someone else's and tweak the numbers. So I would do that. And then all night, I'm just sitting there waiting for this injury news. Like you're sitting there on the Fantasy Labs NBA page waiting for JB to just put the update out so you know what player to put in. And it's just like every fucking day for the whole season from October until when there's finals.
The way you guys are describing DFS sounds very similar to a prediction market, except you're trying to predict a bunch of different variables at once.
Yeah, I've never thought about it like that, but it's essentially what it is. And like, yeah, and then you have like some level of constraints. Generally with DFS, the way that like the constraints work is every player has a salary based on, you know, the site's projections, like internal stuff, and goes up and down every day based on previous performance. And then you have like a total salary cap that you can spend. And so like really, really early on, everyone's just kind of making their own lineups and doing stuff. And then really quickly what everyone realized is like, this is not the best way to be doing this. And so then all of these optimizer sites came out, and there was like one that was really popular. And so in any of these tournaments, you could max enter 150 times. Mm-hmm. And so what you would do is you wouldn't even make your own lineups anymore. You would just upload all of your projections and then put it into an optimizer, and it would spit out your 150 best lineups from those projections.
Wow.
And it would like tell you your exposure to every player. And so that like, it really ended up like when you were playing very seriously, it boiled down to player exposure. And so it was like, you really, unless it was like a surefire thing, there was some massive mispricing, you never wanted to have more than say 25-30% exposure to an individual player because of just like the chance they get hurt or something.
Right.
And then it all just kind of boiled down to tweaking exposures and trying to get to levels you were comfortable with.
It kind of sounds like the name of the game is maximizing variance without sacrificing EV. So depending on what the prize distribution in a particular tournament is, you're looking for outliers.
Yeah.
You're not looking for consistent good performance.
Yeah. The tournaments were always extremely top heavy.
You would be good without even knowing anything about sports.
Because that's exactly what it was.
you might have an advantage because you wouldn't be biased to be like, I fucking hate this running. Like, you would just be completely unbiased. It'd be interesting to see.
Yeah, so there's another game mode that is like a 50-50 as opposed to the tournaments. And with those, it's all just like you literally want to get the most chalk lineup possible where you have all the players who everyone else has, because then you're just more likely to be in the top 50%, assuming that like everyone does well, who kind of everyone is expecting to play.
Are there particular sports where the optimal strategy is more known, or others that are harder?
Yes.
Yeah.
Baseball, I think, is the most like math-based DFS. I've never really tried it. I'm not a baseball guy, and it's like really, really math intense. And so I just like never really was super excited about it.
I guess that makes sense. Baseball is a matchup game, right? Whether it's pitcher, hitter, or, batted ball, fielder.
Football's the most volatile, and I would say the least solved.
Yeah.
I would say NBA is a little bit in the middle.
Yeah. Football's really high variance because it's just with the way that the points work. Like in basketball, you can really, and I don't know that much about baseball, so that one I don't really know. But like with basketball, you can pretty much get down to some level of like, well, you can just look and say, okay, this player scores 1.5 fantasy points per minute they play. And over the course of a season, they play 30 to 35 minutes a game. And you can get like a pretty good estimate that, over a full season, you're going to hit within that range most of the time. With football, the challenge is you have like, especially with like wide receivers, that's where a lot of the variance happens, because you can have a particular player who has 2 catches but they have 100 receiving yards and 2 touchdowns. And like a lot of what football projections end up coming into is they have like boiled down to this idea of like air yards and other things where it's like the potential amount of receiving yards they could have got and like targets, and trying to do the similar types of projections, but there's just really, really high variance in the results of people's catches. And so that's definitely the one that's like the least solved. And I'm not really sure it can be solved. It just has a lot of like variable outcomes.
Yeah. And like, a lot more, I think, references on, you're thinking a lot more about ownership and the fucking upside, and you're just not really thinking about the same things you would when you're NBA.
It's so interesting how the more you zoom in on any particular field, the more interesting it becomes.
Oh, yeah. Do you have any other fields like that you think have been like fun that you've learned about recently?
I mean, beyond the obvious, which is crypto, which is nerd snipes all of us.
Yeah. Yeah. What do you think is the most, or what do you think was the most interesting period of time in crypto that you were around?
I think it's now, honestly. And I think it's because we're looking at higher dimensional problems than we have. And many of those problems are around, how to organize groups of people, towards a collective goal. And you could argue that, crypto, it has been that since its inception, where you're coming up with mechanisms to trust a group of strangers to validate your transfer from A to B, even in the case of Bitcoin. But Ethereum let you validate like general purpose bits of information rather than just payment transfers, and now you have applications built on top that are coordination layers for any organization to carry out its mission, whether it's fully on chain or fully in the real world or somewhere in between.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it definitely, like, current time feels like it's tackling some of the more interesting problems,
more intractable problems even.
Yeah. And it also is like a very frustrating time.
Say more.
Just because like, I think like, because the problems feel, they're like more abstract in a certain way. And like, I guess more like philosophical to a certain extent. It's like when DeFi summer happened, it was very much like the problems people were trying to solve was like, okay, we want a money market. Let's make a money market. And it wasn't like, how do I convince some guy in London to not rug me in my governance proposal for something? It's like, it felt like easier problems to solve.
It could be that we're back there.
Yeah. Yeah.
We just don't know if they're in London or not.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. And so that's like, I think that's where like some of the like governance in general is just really challenging and frustrating. And I'm like pretty jaded from a lot of it from like Maker, and like,
totally.
Maker's governance was, it was an interesting time.
Still is.
Governance
Yeah.
feels like a dirty word. I hate saying it.
So one thing that I'll say is it's really cool to watch the back and forth between the application layer and the protocol layer. So let's use your example of a money market. You can say, hey, this is what we can build. Like this is the solidity and what it's capable of. And here's the Ethereum virtual machine and the operations we can do. Given all of this, how can we construct the best possible way for people to trustlessly borrow money against other assets that they own? And then we build that, and it doesn't quite work in practice how we think it's going to work, maybe because of something about the protocol layer. Like I don't think people were thinking about MEV in 2018 when Robert and co were building Compound, but then you see it play out in practice. You learn a little bit more about the protocol layer. Either you evolve the protocol layer, either with Ethereum upgrades or making a new execution environment to address some of the problems that you see in practice, or you change your application to be more resilient to those problems. And that's a cycle that I imagine continuing.
Yeah, that's a good point. And we've seen that with like Osmosis and Uniswap both building in the same world of like, how do you swap stuff? And they've, one took the path of let's change the protocol layer to make it more resilient to the challenges that a swap has. And one is, building more tools to avoid MEV on Ethereum.
I actually think a really interesting design space is turning MEV from a liability into an asset where you can essentially, put up bounties in the form of MEV to incentivize searchers to carry out actions that are net beneficial to your system.
Well, that was like, it's been happening for a long time. It just isn't super popular. Wasn't it like the ESD and DSD would pay people there was like a bounty to go through like every, whatever like the cycles were that they had?
Yeah. It's been I think the first use case of it was actually keepers for liquidations in Compound. And there's been plenty of other examples since then, but I still think that design space is underexplored. Yeah,
I agree. It feels like something that would make a lot of sense in a lot of the like long-term like auction-y stuff and stuff like that, where you have these kind of like basic things that need to happen, like settling an auction. And you have like when you settle an auction for nouns, there is like a bunch of money that you could pay someone a small piece of to settle that auction.
Totally.
And I guess probably the challenge there is like figuring out how much you have to pay them and all that kind of stuff. But obviously those are very solvable things.
I think one really interesting application is particularly for nouns where the entire treasury is in ETH, but you have a lot of people that are bringing proposals to the organization that have liabilities in the real world that need to get paid in dollars. And that's a bit clunky right now because the proposal's in ETH. People will add additional funds to account for the volatility. If the volatility is more than they accounted for, maybe they have to request more money to top up. And it's generally not a very smooth experience, but you could imagine using some sort of tool to permissionlessly convert ETH to dollars as part of the proposal flow, maybe by letting MEV bots exchange the treasury for dollars at the Chainlink Oracle price until you've accumulated enough of a balance that you can pay your builders in the currency they want. So that's just one example.
And do you think that's better than just market selling? Let's say it's not some ridiculous amount of ETH that's going to cause like crazy slippage.
Yeah.
Is it better to do that than just having a Uniswap swap be part of the like execution of the proposal?
I think yes, because you can set tighter limits on it. For a Uniswap swap, for example, you have to go through the governance process. You have to go through a time lock. And so you're trying to set slippage limits based on 5-day-old information. Yeah. And that's generally not going to be great. But if you can say like, hey, I'm happy to swap at whatever Chainlink says is the current price because I trust Chainlink, or maybe I trust a Uniswap TWAP, whatever your oracle of choice might be. The surplus is kept by MEV bots, but you can view that as sort of a decentralization tax for doing something in a DAO native way that might be easy for a trusted group of humans to do, but hard to do permissionlessly.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. I wonder, are there any like applications or things that you would be excited about that like outside of nouns swapping cash that like you think are kind of uniquely powered by something like this? Like in my head, I feel like there's some sort of like order book stuff and things like that could potentially work better, where you have like MEV bots that are essentially like executing order book things because they're arbing against Uniswap and all these different like tools. But I've thought about it for like 5 seconds as opposed to, I'm assuming you've thought about it a little bit longer.
Yeah, I think the fulfillment of limit orders example is a good one. In the case of something like Uniswap, for example, you could imagine exposing a little bounty to pull out a LP position when it goes out of range, because you wanted to exit the pool. Once you've gone out of range, and you can do it that way, or you can build a future version of Uniswap that automatically does that as part of the protocol design. But generally, I think my design philosophy is to keep each layer as simple as possible, and outsource the complexity to areas where it's most needed. So Uniswap works just fine the way it is, and you can build layers on top of it if you need additional functionality. But all of that functionality can clutter up the core code base. And so maybe it's better to not have it.
Yeah, because you can always have like a wrapper contract that you deposit your LP through that like actually owns your LP position and can
totally.
Yeah.
And I think that this, from what I've seen thus far, this is in line with the design philosophy of Tessera.
I would say so. Yeah. I think like I got a lot of inspiration from that as well, like from like Maker. Even though like Maker as a system is like crazy complex, it did like do a decently good job of like trying to like push the complexity to the sides, even though like as an entire system it is like pretty confusing. But like even the idea of like not batching actions and using a proxy contract instead to do those types of things, and so you don't have you like a function to deposit and take out a loan and all these different things in one transaction at like the protocol level, but instead it's just like, yeah, we have a proxy contract that lets you do all of those things automatically.
That sounds nice, but really I would just like to be able to read the smart contract and have variable names that make sense. I
mean, I'm fully on team variable names. They were not my choice. I was actually one of the people in the team at the time who was like, hey, this is kind of dumb, guys. I mean, it's not my first choice. But at that point I was I'd only been there for like a month, and so I was not the one who got to make those decisions.
I feel like I'm so fucking stupid. I'm just listening to variables and I'm like, yeah, I took software 1, got a C, failed out of computer science, and gave up.
I took one computer science class in college. My major was actually chemical engineering.
How did you get chemical engineering? Systems?
I just picked something that was interesting, and I liked chemistry in high school, and it sounded hard. And I always figured that like my second choice was like economics, actually. And I was like, okay, is it going to be easier to go from chemical engineering to economics or vice versa? So I figured I could always generalize later. And it's actually kind of funny looking back on it, how much of what I learned was applicable to economics and finance. So
really?
Yeah. So one big part of chemical engineering is control theory, because you're operating these, chemical plants, factories, refineries, laboratories. And a big part of it is like, trying to make what you're trying to make. So more formally, like having a set point on your process and a controller that looks at some property of the output. So maybe you're making, 40% alcohol in your distillery, and trying to change the variables of your process or change the inputs to your process to achieve that target. And so that's control theory in a nutshell, but that's the exact same thing that we see in finance, where, in some sense, the Federal Reserve is like a human controlled controller, where, they're targeting 2% inflation and they're playing with the levers they have on the economy every few weeks to target that. And we see that with systems like Reflexer, Rye, where you take the human out of the loop.
Yeah. I think that kind of stuff is really interesting. We actually had a pretty long conversation with Tarun yesterday about royalties and like the ideas of potentially like having dynamic royalties and stuff like that. And I think like in general, more smart contract things that are like, changing variables or settings kind of outside of a governance vote to change interactions or, just like generally make things feel better is like something that I'm surprised we haven't seen more of over the last couple of years. I feel like we've gotten really, really governance vote heavy. But like I saw a post.
I'm actually a governance minimalist.
I could see that. Well, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I generally am as well. Not surprisingly. And so like, I'm excited to see, like I saw a post from, I think it was like CrocSwap today or something about how they have like variable fees in their pools based on, I didn't actually have time to read it, but like the idea of like a Uniswap pool that had a variable fee based on say like volume or liquidity or something to me is like a super interesting idea.
Yeah. Maybe based on historical volatility or something like that. Could be interesting too. I don't know, but back on the royalties thing, like I'm actually surprised that royalties have been as successful as they've been thus far in the NFT space, given that it's not really something that you can enforce at the smart contract level. And this is like independent of whether you believe that royalties are the best way for creators to, monetize their work or not. I'm just, given that you can't enforce it in the smart contracts, I'm surprised it's working so well.
So I think it isn't that surprising on the art side of things. Like the social constructs are so much stronger than the tech that like the ethos in that art community is like you pay the fucking 10%. But like in the collectible realm, I see a ton of people, myself included, using X2Y2 or other OTC. Like not X2Y2 isn't OTC, but if I want to use SudoSwap or NFT Trader or something, that's super common, especially when people are taking losses. Like no one wants to pay 2.5% when they're losing a lot of money, and a lot of people right now are selling for losses. So I'm not really too surprised because the art community is so much more socially constructed. And I see a ton of people in the collectible community. I mean, I could be biased because when I see a ton of people, like you can look at the volume charts and see I'm probably objectively wrong and it's anecdotal evidence, but like a lot of people in my circles are using those.
I check CryptoSlam like at least every day, like at least once a day, just to see like general volume, what are the big things that are selling, where are they selling, and a lot of like the highest traded NFTs every day are being traded on X2Y2 private sales with no fees. Like I would say,
does X2Y2 not collect royalties?
So 0.5. X2Y2 has a 0.5% exchange fee, and royalties are optional. So you can, is it as the buyer, opt into paying royalties? I think it is.
Yeah, I recently sold like 3 NFTs on there, and it defaults the creator royalty to 0%, and I didn't even see a variable to change it.
Yeah, and then if you do
defaults are powerful.
Yeah, for real. But then if you do a private sale on X2Y2, there is no fee, and so that's like seems to be the main way that people are like just OTC trading NFTs now, and most of the NFTs that I'm seeing at like the really high, anytime you see like a Bored Ape that sells for a lot of money now, there's like more than a 50% chance it's an X2Y2 private sale.
Wow, interesting.
Yeah, it has definitely shifted since the bear. Like people, going back to this conversation yesterday a little bit, but like people are so much happier to pay a royalty when they're in profit, and when they're taking a loss, like no one wants to pay the royalty.
My main issue with royalties as they're constructed today is they incentivize volatility, which I'm not sure is a healthy dynamic, where if let's say, a team, releases a roadmap or changes a roadmap or creates drama, they can, make profit from,
the Zagabond is like the perfect example for that. Or, even it was kind of interesting to see like when Moonbirds went CCO, like I think they like dumped a little bit. It was interesting in that scenario where it was like, oh shit. But there's definitely scenarios where it's like the volatility is getting the team paid, even though the holders are now down.
Yeah, I guess the extreme version of this is I don't know if it's still the current trend or it was the current trend recently, but letting people mint your NFTs for free and setting high royalties to monetize.
Yeah.
I feel like that hasn't.
It's died
that kind
off.
of died pretty
Yeah.
quick.
I mean, yeah, it was a weird time. That was
It was like what, 3 or 4 weeks? It wasn't that long. Like,
yeah, it was like the goblins or whatever they were, and then
it was the roller coaster meme. Like the goblins were the top of the roller
Yeah, and
coaster,
then
and then we
Wag
worked
died.
our way down, and
Yeah.
then next thing you know, it was free, but no one traded it.
Do you have any thoughts around like what you think a better solution for the like long term
For royalties.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not
so
necessarily
for collections, I have a good sense. For one
Okay.
of ones, I honestly have no idea.
that's fine.
But for collections, I think having the initial creators retain some percentage of the supply
Mm-hmm.
is a much more incentive aligned way to participate in the upside. And,
Yeah.
I would say probably most famously, Larva Labs did that with CryptoPunks. The Nounders do that with Nouns. Paradigm is actually going that route with Art Gobblers as well.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that. That makes sense. Yeah, I think I had proposed to yesterday the idea of potentially like not necessarily having a noun style distribution, but assuming possible with the set of art, basically like having a continual drip to the creator where you say you start with 500 and every however many days a new one is minted and goes to the creator in like kind of a similar vein of you slowly dilute everyone over time, but the creator kind of has this long-term incentive to want to see things do well.
Totally.
Yeah. But I don't know. Have you been following the SudoSwap? Like how intensely have you been following SudoSwap?
Pretty closely.
Has it like maintained volume recently? I feel like it's generally slowed down a lot over the last like little
So
bit.
I think there was an initial surge of volume through perhaps future expectation of airdrops for users, whether that be LPs or traders,
Mhm.
or there were a couple of projects that made SudoSwap pools an integral part of the design of their project. So you can allow NFTs to be sold on a curve as part of your mechanism design, and we saw a flurry of projects like that, which I think contributed to the initial early volume numbers. But it's kind of surprising to hear that volume is down because aggregators are now routing there.
Yeah. I think my like take is like maybe
Maybe it's just a bear market.
maybe it's just a bear market,
Could
but
be.
like also maybe like I'm not totally sure that like NFT market makers have really like flocked there by any means, which is like kind of surprising. But
It does
I don't
make
know
it a
what it
lot
would
easier
take.
to passively market make.
Yeah.
So for somebody who happens to own a large number of low value NFTs and isn't a programmer, it's pretty painful to sit there and adjust your orders manually by clicking buttons on your MetaMask as the floor price changes.
Yes.
It's much easier to say, hey, like I'm willing to buy or sell these NFTs, and every time I sell one, let's increase the price for the next one by 5%. So it's much easier for I would say passive whales to become active participants, but for an NFT market making operation, I don't think it changes anything and might actually be less efficient.
Yeah. And like to me, I think the best thing that SudoSwap has right now is that it's the easiest place to just like market list a shit ton of NFTs.
Totally.
And so like I feel like there are going to end up being better solutions to that than SudoSwap. And so I'll be curious to see how much people actually value the like that passive market making.
The other interesting design decision that SudoSwap made was, so when you put your NFTs into your pool, right, they're all now fungible with each other in the sense that anyone can buy any of them,
Mm-hmm.
or anyone can sell anything in the collection to you. But there is no like fungible NFTX
token.
vault style representation of that. So you don't, even though the fungibility is there across, let's say, your pool and my pool, it's not there explicitly. And so those tokens can't be used elsewhere in crypto land.
Yeah. Well, we saw that like one of the projects that was on there was like the pseudo Eno thing or
didn't see
whatever. It's like literally like this shit coin, dog coin on SudoSwap. But they had like, then they made, I actually thought this was like kind of an interesting idea in like theory, but obviously this like dog coin, shit coin thing isn't going to be the one to make it really popular. But so they had like a farming site that looked like Sushi Swap basically, or like Yams, where you would go and earn their like token snacks, and you could deposit your pools to earn snacks based on like the pool's TVL. And what you like, they had one that was basically like a buy side liquidity pool. And so they were able to like try to, and it failed because this was all just like a stupid meme thing. But like you could theoretically with a governance token for a project, like have like buy side liquidity bids that wasn't just like floor price offers, which I thought was like pretty interesting. And then another one for just like market making.
A treasury offering to buy back its NFTs or
yeah. Or just like if, you know, so like an example is, Loomdart's thing, Loomlock, they buy anything that's under 0.6 ETH off of OpenSea. And like I could see them doing something like this where if that's like what they want to incentivize, you could potentially incentivize other users to do this with a token or something and say, instead of us buying them all back, we're just going to have some like light, you know, like liquidity farming for anyone who has like pseudo swap buy side orders that are at or above 0.06 or 0.6 Ethereum. So you could like potentially do some really interesting like liquidity incentive mechanisms there.
Totally. I don't think I love the idea in generally of incentivizing listings because it's just a hard problem because, you know, the value of a listing is sort of a function of the duration that it's there and how close it is to market price. But it's very hard to determine market price for anything other than the floor, which is not necessarily easy.
I mean, we've seen LooksRare change the listing incentives quite a bit. I don't even know what they are now, but I know when they first came out, it was something like flat. Like if you were within 1.5x or 2x of the floor, like you all got the same reward. So the floor was
at 2x the floor.
So if the floor was 10, like I'm listing it at 19.99, but like if you listed it at 10.5, we were getting the same reward. Then that quickly changed to be like the closer you are to the floor, the bigger reward you get. The further you are away from the floor, the less of the reward you get. And then it got changed to whatever it is now. But it was like, I liked that they were experimenting with it because I didn't see anyone else trying to incentivize listings. And it's like, even if it's not the right answer, it's like showing us what can happen.
Yeah.
In like a pretty big volume marketplace.
It was interesting to see how the first version of LooksRare trade mining was so similar to what DYDX did. Where it was a function of trade volume. And so you wound up with some amount of wash trading. And that wash trading would happen up until the point at which it was no longer profitable. But, you know, it's only a problem insofar as there isn't organic volume on your exchange. And once you reach a minimum threshold of organic volume, what were, you know, stupid and broken incentives before now become viable.
Yeah. I think
it's path dependent.
Yeah, I think that LooksRare was so close with their initial launch to like actually eating into NFT volume. And I honestly, I think their biggest mistake was just not undercutting OpenSea's fees enough. Because they went from I think theirs are 2% and OpenSea's 2.5%. I feel like if they had launched with X2Y2 style fees, it like could have been a very different story of people like actually moving over. Because they had for a minute, they were putting up like a good fight. And then kind of it seemingly has dropped off a lot where they do less. Well? They do less volume than X2Y2 now. X2Y2 is the second largest NFT exchange.
Wow.
And it's like not really that close. X2Y2 does a couple $1 million of volume in NFTs a day.
Yeah. I mean, X2Y2 from a selling perspective, you're getting the best deal. Like I have to list at least 2% plus creator royalty greater on LooksRare to get the same amount of ETH back than X2Y2. So it's like, when I'm listing on Blur, I'm honestly just checking the X2Y2 box now, and letting it rip and autofill rather than like setting. I don't want to set a different price for LooksRare and X2Y2 and then have to sign 2 transactions per listing. So if I'm listing like 50 things, it's just going to add 50 fucking more clicks to my life.
Right.
Yeah.
So you having a good Blur experience?
I'm loving Blur.
I've been gathering from your tweets.
Yeah. No,
Yeah, Blur's really good.
I full disclosure, angel investor.
Yeah.
Angel investor. But we love Blur. Pac-Man.
Have you used it all?
Only very early on. I haven't been doing a ton of NFT trading recently, so I haven't had occasion to use it.
Updates have been impressive. Like it feels like their update cadence is like every week. I'm
also an investor, so I'll go in and check it out.
Yeah, every week I'm just like, oh, this is new. Like they added a new button that when you're listing, it is like top trait floor and you just click it, and then like I can list 50 tit badges, for example, like top trait
Great
listing,
example.
and it'll just dynamically change each floor to whatever the highest floor trait is, and then I can list them. And like stuff like that is just nowhere else to be seen.
Yeah.
And it's just little quality of life UI elements that like stack on top of each other. So it's like, okay, that by itself doesn't feel great, but then the fact that
you can denominate your listings in multiples of the floor price.
I don't know if that's a slider, but like the top trait.
That's something I would love to see.
There's like a little slide. I have to see what the variable is. I haven't used it. There's like new UI elements they add, and I don't use it or tweak it. But like I look at it and I'm like, oh, like what does a slider do? Like maybe the slider does something with that. But if you like request anything from Pac-Man, I feel like they implement it really quickly, or they at least tell you when they're going to implement it. So like obviously we were asking for X2Y2 like months ago, and he was like, no, like it's really important, but we're like working on this other piece of technology that's going to make it like more seamless, so it's going to take a minute. It's like, all right, but he's so responsive.
What else do you guys think is promising in like either NFT consumer tech or NFT infrastructure land that's not related to what you're building?
That's a good question.
I mean, it's biased, but like I like OM, like the on Cyber Metaverse at 6529, and all the collectors now having time to kind of think about their collections and curate these better galleries. Like you're seeing a bunch of cool districts come up. And I'm always thinking about
it's the network state.
Yeah, I'm thinking about thinking about ways to just like show my collection off in different ways. So I'm excited about like different display tech on the walls too, or like the real world. But I haven't pulled the trigger on one of these like token frame or logos,
atomic form, or any of those.
Yeah, I mean, there's like 5 or 6.
Yeah, there's so many.
I'm actually trying to spend less time in the metaverse these days.
Yeah,
I'm looking forward to the day when the tech is good enough that I can be in the metaverse and not sacrifice my health and well-being and physical fitness.
Yeah, no,
Amen.
Agreed. One thing that I had it in my head and I forgot. I'm pretty bullish on curation. Like I think we're due for a lot more vertical marketplaces that are curation focused as opposed to like specific NFT focused. Like the ENS market is awesome for ENS, but like I'm like pretty bullish on super rare as an idea. Whether or not it's super rare, like I think super rare is here for the long haul just because they were so early. Like they could really royally fuck up for a long time and probably still be the premier one of one like curated art marketplace.
Are TCRs coming back?
Yeah, I think so a little bit. But like I think it actually makes a lot more sense here where you like just having opinionated marketplaces for artwork and artists of saying like this is good. Like, and we've decided that it is good, and kind of like it's almost like the art gallery of the metaverse. Like Foundation was seemingly going in that direction, and they now seem to be doing something more like what Zora was doing. But I think in general, like that kind of stuff will do well as we get more more naive end consumers.
Yeah, I mean, I would love to see more curation. Help separating the signal from the noise is always appreciated, and those are extremely valuable skill sets. I think we're not quite there yet with compensating curators in a sustainable way.
Yeah. I'm excited to see what JPEG does there.
As am I.
I think that they're thinking about it. I think they're probably one of the only ones who are really thinking about it. Them and Deca, I think is. I haven't messed around with Deca too much.
I've messed around a little bit, but I don't fully wrap my head around the whole ecosystem. Like I minted my thing. I got a couple levels on it.
This problem applies not just to art, but also to Web3 social media.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I'm curious to see there as well. But yeah, it's a good point. And because at the end of the day, it's really just like someone who you trust signaling that this thing is worth your eyes or potentially your money.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think we'll see some protocols that try to do it at like a more protocol level of incentivizing the right people to want to curate things and potentially take fees on successful curation. But then I think we'll also see like some really like popular consumer products.
I mean, we've seen some experiments that didn't quite go as planned in that area. I'd say BitClout is one of them.
I mean, I think of how Super Rare has the spaces right now, and as a curator, so like get voted into a space because you have to have people with the rare token vote for you. And then once you get a space, you curate the artists for it, and you set the fees, and then as a curator, you set what fee you get. So it's more of like there's this dynamic, you know, you can take a small fee, big fee, whatever. But it's starting to put more onus on the curator to kind of have ownership over what they're curating rather than just like helping bring people to the platform. And I think we're going to see more stuff like that. I had someone from like Nifty Gateway reach out to me and ask about doing something like that. I was, no, I'm good. But like, I think you are going to see a higher demand for people trying to do more curation and getting compensated for it. Like we've been talking about this a bit too.
Yeah. What are your feelings on Web3 social since you brought it up?
I'd say undecided at this point. I'm generally like interested in the idea of portable social graphs and like open data. So from that perspective, very, very interested. Personally, for my own use case, what I'm most interested in is understanding my content curation algorithm so that I can choose the right algorithm or tweak the algorithm to deliver me what the best version of myself actually wants, rather than what the version of myself that's scrolling and clicking wants in the moment.
Yeah.
So I think that those sort of levers are extremely powerful. And if you want to optimize it for learning or exposure to serendipity, any of those choices seem more healthy to me than optimizing for ad revenue at the parent company.
Yeah, I guess I hadn't thought about Web3 social from the lens of the value being like controlling your
from
version
the lens
of it. Yeah, from the lens. Have you used Lens at all?
I have not, other than to claim my domain.
So someone claimed my domain and then
Brutal.
Wrote a note.
This is why you need less Twitter followers.
Yeah, they wrote a note and told me I could buy it from them. So I just made another domain that was not the one they took from me. It's like worse domain. I'm like, all right, fuck you. Like I'm not buying the domain squatters domain.
Yeah, you got to stand up to the squatters.
We have a problem.
An idea for a different way of selling domain names where it becomes more expensive over time to guarantee yourself ownership of the domain name for a longer period.
So like in the example of ENS, the more years you want to claim, the more you have to pay.
Exactly, but on an exponential basis.
But then I could just claim it every year for the.
But maybe it's an auction
X to the one
to like get the initial claim or something, and then you pay to register or something. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think probably a Harberger tax mechanism where you pay rent is probably the economically most robust way to do it, but it's not something that humans really like. Yeah. And especially if you want to own a domain and invest in a brand, then the idea that anybody can pay more rent for the domain at any time and take it from you is pretty much a non-starter.
Yeah. Yeah, I wonder if there's some version of Harberger Taxes where like it's not that like anyone can take it at any given time, but there's like some level of like a contention period where it's like, okay, I have Andy.com and I say it's worth $1 million and I'm willing to pay a 5% tax on that every year. And you come and say like, oh, I'll buy Andy.com from you for whatever the like VIG is on top of that. And then I have some period of time to basically make the decision of like, no, now that you're willing to pay that much, I'd rather keep it and I'll up my valuation to whatever it is and up my tax percentage paid.
I kind of feel bad for listeners of this podcast because we started with, I think, fantasy sports and everyone who wanted hardcore mechanism design churned. And then all the fantasy sports people are here listening to us to talk about, mechanism.
Good. We got only the real ones get to hear the fun
fans.
stuff. Yeah.
We only want people to listen to everything. They can't pick and choose. They have to sit down and listen to the fantasy. They have to sit down and listen to Harberger Tax. Half the people are going to have to Google what the fuck that is.
Hamburger tax?
Yeah, the hamburger tax.
Exactly.
Yeah. That's when you don't get cheese on your hamburger. It's just a hamburger tax.
Inflation.
I don't know.
Do we think that the hamburger patties are getting smaller to maintain hamburger
deflationary
price?
patties?
I mean, probably. They're getting smaller or shittier. One or the other, right?
Maybe both.
Probably both.
I guess it depends on what's the elasticity of demand for hamburgers as price goes up.
I feel like it's probably pretty high.
Yeah?
I guess. So what, like, relatively non-essential food do you think has, like, the highest, or the least price sensitivity?
On a percentage basis?
Yeah, sure. Let's say on a percentage basis increase what like, let's say like super non-essential foods. Like I'm going to say like milk is essential because you like need it for coffee and stuff like that.
Does alcohol count?
Alcohol is
alcohol is the answer to that question. So let's say excluding
Okay,
alcohol.
so it's like not something that you can physically get addicted to.
Yeah. So let's just say like,
you.
Is it General Tso's chicken or pizza or burgers or wings?
I'm going to say it's whatever someone has a sentimental or nostalgic attachment to, because that feeling is extremely valuable. And maybe it's burgers for a lot of people, but maybe it's pizza or something else for others.
Yeah, I feel like if a lot of people I know, at least I'm thinking of my family, a lot of people eat fast food. Like if pizza 2x, like they're just gonna get McDonald's. Like they're not gonna like pay 2x for pizza when they can get double the McDonald's now for that value. Like they'll see the relative value and just switch. So like for me,
maybe it's like a ribeye,
like steak.
Yeah.
Are we all going to be eating bugs in 20 years?
I'll be dead if that's the case.
I've maybe this is a hot take. I don't think crypto Twitter will like me for this, but I've eaten the bugs and I liked the bugs.
I've eaten bugs, I think, in Mexico and maybe also in Colombia.
I like them.
And, that was like the entire bug, deep fried and dipped in something, and it's pleasantly crunchy. I've also tried the, Silicon Valley, you'll eat the crickets ground up in powder form and it's good for you and you'll like it. Startup food. And it's, I'd say, pleasantly nutty, but slightly off. And hopefully they can fix the slightly off. But like generally I'm on board with the thesis of get people the nutrients that they need in the most sustainable way. But, crickets are not Lindy.
No, there's a whole slew of interesting things that we could see from an insect eating class of human citizens.
So I think Taleb is the one who initially said this, or at least the person that I heard it from and deeply believed it. But if you can easily choose something that is Lindy and not like negatively impact your life, it's probably better. So for example, like glass has been used by humans for thousands of years. No real known side effects other than a broken piece of glass. But yeah, exactly. The plastic water bottle there, we don't have quite as much data on it. And it very well might be fine. And it very well might be way easier and cheaper to manufacture. But if you can trivially switch to the thing that's more Lindy and it doesn't negatively impact you, then the downside is low.
Yeah.
It's a very nice heuristic if you need to make a decision and you don't really have a lot of variables, and then you can just look at that.
And I don't have to agree with everything someone says to identify a good heuristic and take it for my own life.
Yeah, I got blocked by Taleb.
Impressive.
I called him an intellectual yet idiot, which I think is a term he created because he went on some really stupid anti-crypto rant, and I just said IYI.
I actually like to listen to the crypto skeptics.
Yeah, I just like the shit posts. You know me, I love to follow people I disagree with and just shit post. I didn't think that saying that, the acronym, to him would make him block me, but he might have had a bad day.
Speaking of following people you disagree with, I wish it was easier to switch from one type of feed to the other. And I've tried Twitter lists, but
I love the list.
Keeping it up to date, it's just really tough.
I need an MEV. This year I'll pay some MEV fees if they can when I buy a piece of art, it adds the artist to my Twitter list automatically. I would pay a 0.05% fee just to do that.
That sounds cool. I would maybe even pay just to read Deez's feed for a couple of hours without having to, follow everyone myself.
So my automatic following would just be a list that you could follow.
Exactly.
So I have an NFT list.
If I think you're successful and I think the information that you're consuming is a big part of the reason why, maybe I just want to consume that information as well. And all of that data is public.
So yeah. And I would say too, my alpha for the people listening is I do use the list a lot, and I do try to keep them up to date, but it's really fucking hard. But I follow 5,000 people now, and a lot of the people I follow are more for I don't unfollow a lot of people. The only people I unfollow, if you say something really ridiculous, I'm just fuck it. I unfollow. Unless it's someone I know. If it's someone I know and have a good relationship, they could say whatever the fuck. I'm not going to follow them. But I have 2 lists. One list is just like 600 some people that are in the NFT space that might have some higher signal to noise. It might even be some bots that I think like looking at certain sale alerts are important. Then I have another list that's like 100-ish people, which are only artists or companies I'm invested in.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, that's my like highest signal list. So like I go through that with more intent, looking for like, who's putting out new shit? Who should I be aware of? What should I be, more focused on supporting and highlighting and that type of stuff. And those lists are all public.
What if you could get a daily report of the newly created accounts that high signal list had started following?
That would be nice. I
think
use
that's
this,
the most evergreen Twitter alpha.
Yeah.
I use this Twitter tool called Black Magic. And it's basically this like mixture of a better way to see all your favorite people and what they tweet, a better way to have CRM on Twitter. So you have like custom notes, custom pins for threads, whole bunch of scheduling shit. So like for quote tweeting, retweeting, way easier way to like mass like and mass interact with people. Like a way to sort your top followers based off of engagement, a way to see
Twitter
like
macros.
Yeah, it's like $20 a month. It's the most.
I've heard the Twitter API is highly rate limited, and so third-party tools are relatively limited in what they can give you. And I guess we were talking about Web3 social media earlier. This is one of the main things I'm excited about is when you let people build their business on top of a social media platform. If you give them assurances on the smart contract layer in this instance that you're not going to make some kind of change that's going to obsolete their business, at some capricious whim, then they're going to be able to invest a lot more heavily into building that tool. So, you don't want to be Zynga on Facebook, for example.
Yeah. Zynga has come up more often than it should during these 10 podcasts.
Mafia Wars.
Yeah, no, I think that makes sense. And I think it like, yeah, I think of like the Reddit, a lot of stuff with like Reddit as well. And like subreddits getting banned or different things like that. And like, if you have like some level of assurance that like everything isn't just going to disappear because they've changed their mind or have someone new in charge who doesn't like what you're doing. Or like, even if they're not going to show it on whatever their main user interface is, it like still exists somewhere in the ether.
I mean, it's a balance between promises of immutability and the ability to be flexible and make upgrades.
Yeah.
And many such cases.
Yeah. Many such cases. What do you think? One of my feelings about Web3 social is that like there has to be some serious step level improvement from Twitter to whatever the next like major social media platform that crypto Twitter uses. And I like don't know what that would be. Like Twitter is pretty fine. It relatively gets the job done. And like for my own personal life, I don't know what would have to change in order for me to be like, okay, I'm not going to do most of my socials on Twitter anymore. I'm instead going to use this new thing.
I would have to get rewarded for the impressions I bring to the platform or something.
I never thought I would stop using MySpace.
Yeah. Well, but like, what was it that made you move from MySpace to Facebook? Was it just that everyone else did? And what, in that case, what was it that made everyone else move from MySpace to Facebook?
Well, I think this transition happened, I think senior year of high school. And there was a very high density of college kids on Facebook. So that's where all of the older kids that had, been your friends in high school and were now at college had moved their presences. And so it became the trendy thing to do.
Yeah.
Well, I think it starts with how Facebook started out. Like it wasn't just open to everybody, right? Like it started with just the kids at Harvard, and then it started around other universities, and then it grew out. So it was exclusive in the sense that maybe other people wanted to get in. And then once it grew big enough, it opened up for everybody. And I think like for me, I was in 8th grade around that time. So like all the cool kids in high school were like your cool kids in college where they were there. And I'm like, all right, I got to get there.
Yeah.
And then that's how I got there. So it was just like following the herd, but it's like, to build that initial mimetic desire to be in the herd, there's some type of hurdle.
Yeah. Have you used Farcaster?
It's on my to-do list.
Same. I haven't yet.
I think
I've heard the user interface is very similar to Twitter. At this stage.
I mean, it's decentralized Twitter with the very small portion of the network right now.
You've used it, right, Deez? You're signed up?
Yeah, I have some tweets up or some.
Do you have to sign a message to log in?
Dude, I haven't used it in like 6 months, honestly. I think
it's been out for 6 months.
Dude, I talked to him last year. Like last summer is when I talked to him on a call and got onboarded.
Oh wow,
it's been crazy. But yeah, I feel like it makes your own wallet for Farcaster, if I remember correctly, and then you can like sign once to tie your real wallets to this new Farcaster wallet, and then like the app works from that wallet that is your account.
Oh, that's interesting.
So it's like you can link things, but you're not fucking constantly using your main wallet to prove who you are.
I think one of the big unlocks for Web3 social is the ability to prove certain things about the NFTs you hold or the accumulated experience that you've had on chain in some privacy preserving way, or at least to the extent possible. So, things like ZK attestation, for example, I think will be, not really exposed to the user, but other than us, like a badge that says, hey, this person, owns one dick butt at least. Yeah. Maybe more, but definitely one.
Yeah. No, that's a good point. Yeah.
And then so you can like, when they have something to say about dick butts, you can take their word a little bit more seriously.
Yeah.
I kind of like some of like the degen score things. It shows like, oh, like minted Bored Apes. Like it doesn't say like what Bored Apes you minted or everything.
And
but
everything that you attest to is like a one circle in a giant Venn diagram, right? And if you're not careful, then people are going to be able to figure out
triangulate you pretty quickly.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, the triangulation is scary in the real world too. Like, I don't know if you ever saw this, but somebody made a proof of concept at some point for some online dating app where they spoofed their location to 3 different places, and were able to look at someone's profile from like each of those locations and use the X miles away number to triangulate them.
That's scary.
Scary.
Yeah.
I think they started rounding location data after that.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's creepy.
It's the same problem as triangulation in this other space, right?
But probably less negative consequences. Like at the end of the day, if someone figures out like, oh, I actually own 5 crypto dick butts, like that's not that big of a deal.
Yes.
Well, at least not right now. It isn't.
Right now, it isn't.
Yeah, when they're 10 million each floor.
Once they're banned.
Yeah. Once
they get banned.
Yeah. Once it's illegal to own a crypto dick butt, then it'll be a problem because I'm not selling my dick butts.
Do you think we're going to see an increasing trend of, say, crypto developers contributing anonymously?
Yes, I think we will, but I do think, like, at least in the NFT space right now, I think less so the DeFi space. In the DeFi space, just generally, yes, I think we will continue to see that. In the NFT space, I feel like since it's still so social and so much of it is like this social contract, people really don't trust that many anonymous creators, especially with how rampant the last year and a half were with just like scam PFP project mints and all of that. It's only like the OG anonymous people like Xcopy and stuff who people are like totally chill with them being anonymous.
Well, because they have a reputation attached to an identity, right?
Yeah. And so I think we'll have to see better incentive mechanisms before, like the Nounders, I think is a great example where they can be anonymous because I think they've, designed Nouns in such a way that they didn't have that much incentive to like make some quick rug pull exit scam thing. It would have really had to have been a long game, and so I think we'll have to see better incentive mechanisms for NFTs before we get there. But I do think that will continue to.
I mean, there's different levels of anonymity, pseudonymity, et cetera, right? Like there's Satoshi level, no one knows who you are, like no one knows, what IP address you connect to anything from, and then there's like anonymity in the sense that you meet people in real life at a conference and you tell them who you are, but you're just pseudonymous on Twitter to build a persona. Yeah.
Yeah. I think we'll definitely see like all different levels of it kind of depending on the risks that you're taking and different things like that. But I don't know, like Deez, if you had to do it over, like all over again, would you be more or less anonymous or the same amount?
I think I did it pretty much the way I would have wanted. In hindsight, I wouldn't have done the NFT NYC November live rug radio where I like didn't wear a mask or anything. People like took pictures of me, put it on Twitter. Like a couple reply guys were responding to me with like a picture of my face for months. That was annoying to deal with. But like, I really liked how I did the VCon thing with like wearing a mask and being a little more mysterious. I kind of have thought for the last, I mean, ever since I took this job, essentially, I feel like I got this mindset where like I can never be Satoshi, obviously. And I'm too social. Like I need to meet people in person. So like I kind of settled.
Psyops.
Yeah.
I settled on the fact that I'll probably end up like a Joel Zimmerman dead mouse thing where like you can Google dead mouse and probably find his name and see his personal stuff. But like the dead mouse Twitter account has, 10x plus the followers of him, or like you look at Marshmallow, Chris Comstock, it's the same thing. So like I'm not there yet, and I'm going to delay getting there as much as possible, but I think like that's probably the most likely end state for my identity, where it's like Deez will be this 3D hoodie punk, but then, my name will come out and I'll be me or whatever the fuck.
Would you be more or less anonymous or equal amount?
If I was doing it again?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, I'm not anonymous.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes that causes me to take my spiciest takes to, private, trusted venues.
To a Telegram
To do a
chat.
little safe spaces.
And like, maybe it would be fun to experiment with having an anonymous account that is the venue for those sort of things.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, maybe someday I'll try it.
You'd be the next Tuba or something.
Yeah. Well, Tuba's basically not anonymous at this point. I feel like everyone knows who Tuba is.
Well, we won't spoil it.
No. Yeah, it's something that I've thought about a lot where like, I think it's hard to say because I say like, oh, in hindsight, I wish I was more anonymous, but then I'm also like putting my face on this video.
Club Top Shot.
Yeah. And so I think it's hard because there is definitely real value in me being comfortable showing my face and doing things and, being in the Wall Street Journal article about NBA Top Shot. Like that opened up actual doors for me in life. But at the same time, like
your cat is also famous now.
Yeah, I'm mostly just happy for Lola. She's gotten a lot of calls, and anyone asking, no, she's not looking for an agent. She manages her own celebrity,
Famous cat model.
Yeah. But there have been a few instances, and I guess general PSA for people who do this, where like I've been stopped on the street by someone I don't know, and they go, "Oh, you're Andy," and like that's really not cool. It's really weird, and like even if you're really nice about it, something about it is just like really, really jarring.
Is it okay at a conference?
Yes, I think if I'm at like a crypto event or something, if I'm like in a place where it would be totally normal for someone to come up and recognize me, cool. But like when I'm walking to get coffee in the morning with Allie, that's like not where I want some random dude to be like
across the street. Hey, Andy.
Yeah. And like something about that is just like really weird, and it's like generally uncomfortable. And like, any of those interactions in and of itself are like, I've never felt like in danger or anything, but it's more the idea of like, there are people who know what I look like and who could randomly stop me on the street who are, not good people. And like that part of it, my general feeling with that is like, there are much more wealthy, famous stocks people who also walk around on the street. And so like, I'm not the highest target person in the world. But something about that is still like kind of weird and like creepy sometimes.
Yeah. Understandable.
That's something I try to avoid.
Yeah.
But I think like you being doxxed led to a lot of credibility.
Yeah.
Like to what you're building. And I think like, what would you, a question I have is, what would you be if you were an Andy 8052? Like if you couldn't be an Andy name, if you were pseudo-anonymous, like what would you be?
Maybe you could be an Andy and nobody would assume
Fake
that
Andy?
you're an
His
Andy.
name's just Fake Andy.
Yeah. So my name in video games growing up, and like still when I play games is Dr. Applesauce. And so it probably would have been Dr. Applesauce.
our lead dev, his name is Dr. Applesauce.
Yeah. So that
was a PhD in applesauce.
I came up with it in like 6th grade. Remember playing, I think it was Halo 1. It might have been Halo 2, but I think it was Halo 1 where you would have like in-game profiles as well outside of like the Xbox profiles. Mm-hmm. And you just like would make a name for it. I was sitting in my friend's basement in, I don't know, 5th or 6th grade and made my name on his Xbox, Dr. Applesauce. And I thought it was like the funniest thing ever. And then it was one of those things where like when I got an Xbox, I didn't have one at the time, so I would go to his place to play. I made my gamer tag Dr. Applesauce because that's what I would play at his house. And then I was just like, all right, I guess I'm Dr. Applesauce. I don't know.
Do you remember what your favorite Halo symbol was? Like if you're making a new Spartan and you're picking a symbol in a colorway? Like, what do you do?
I don't remember the symbols that well. I was pretty boring.
Okay.
But I think it was, I would normally go with the blue, like they had like a darker blue or something.
Yeah. Like a little indigo.
Yeah.
No, I
can't remember
was
the
really into the skull with the big crown.
Oh yeah, that was. I mean, I feel like everyone liked that one.
Do that little gradient.
Were you a Halo player growing up?
No, first-person shooter games were banned in my parents' house, and so only on the occasions I was at a friend's house.
Okay,
So
yeah.
I'm not.
That's
too,
why
I'm
you
not
got
too
so
good
good
with the dual joysticks.
That's how we got so good at the math and probabilities. And we're finding it out as my question that I asked later on.
I would argue that everybody that's like elite level first-person shooter player like understands Newtonian mechanics on a deep level, or at least the version of it that's in the physics engine.
Yeah, and also like teamwork and a good chunk of strategy too.
No, totally.
Was it like a religious thing, moral thing, just no violent video games?
I think it was just a violence thing.
Yeah.
Did you ever sneak to your friend's house and play Grand Theft Auto?
So I was explicitly allowed to do whatever at friends' houses. They didn't try to control that. It was just like, not in my house.
Yeah, that's fair.
That was always a highlight for me. Like, my parents wouldn't let me get Grand Theft
same.
Auto, but like my buddy's parents didn't give a fuck. Go there and just playing San Andreas, doing whatever.
That was literally me going over to Lewis's house growing up. But yeah, it was always funny for me. So like growing up with my dad being a pastor, people would always be really surprised that like my parents.
Didn't know that.
Yeah, well, I'm a PK. But people were always really surprised that growing up I could like watch violent movies or like play violent video games. They'd be like, "Oh, your parents let you do that?" And I was like, "Yeah, my dad loves to play shooter games." like my dad I remember would play like a ton of Rainbow Six, and there was like this one mission in Rainbow Six, and they would always say "fuck" as it was like loading in, and he would like say. So, my mom would get so mad at him if I was like sitting watching him play Rainbow Six.
I think as violent as it got for my video games was Super Smash Brothers.
What's your favorite character?
To play?
Yeah.
I think I'm a Samus main.
Really?
Yeah. I don't know. The range attacks suit me well.
I'm terrible at Super Smash Brothers.
Samus?
I'm really bad at fighter games.
Yeah. I was definitely more of like a Kirby and Pikachu.
I would play Ice
floating
Climbers.
around.
Dude, I was always
refusing to die.
Yeah, I was always so annoying. Like that was the whole thing with Kirby. Is like you felt like you had just infinite puffs to stay awake.
No, I think annoying players, saying this as an annoying player myself, they figure out a way to be annoying with every character.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, I was just like, because I was always terrible at them. I was just the kid who would just do the smash button over and over again. There's like no real strategy or anything. It's just like, I'm going to keep smashing until you die. But I liked the Ice Climbers because I would just spin around like, with their little spinning attack.
So next time you think about it, you should watch a AI play Super Smash Brothers. It's pretty crazy.
Do I want to feel that bad about myself?
Is it different than like level 9 Super Smash?
It's so much different.
Okay.
It's basically like a reinforcement learning type of algorithm where they sort of train themselves to be extremely good by playing a bunch of different like simulated games.
Mm-hmm.
And it kind of boils down to like finding the move that will initiate the combo that once it starts and assuming perfect execution, which the video game can do, is unstoppable.
I feel like that's like 99% of video games in general. I remember I used to play in college. It's this really shitty, obscure game that no one's ever heard of called iDarb. And it was like, honestly, it was super, super fun. But it was like this like pixely, like flat game, like a 2D game. And it was kind of almost like handball. And so it was 2-on-2 and you could like pass to your teammate. And there was like the map had like different levels and stuff to it, but there were only like 2 maps in the game. And then there were like goals that you would try to throw this ball into. And me and my 3 other friends would always play. We'd always have the same 2 teams. And myself and my teammate figured out this perfect strategy where I could stand in one place. And when I got the ball there, I like had a set of moves that I would do where I would always score. It was impossible to stop me. And so we would just cheese my friends the entire time. And my one friend would run around on my team and try to get the ball. And then he would just immediately throw it to me and I would just cheese and score. And I would never move the whole game. I would just stand there and wait till I got the ball.
Cherry picker.
The worst.
It was fun though. But yeah, I feel like that's how like basically all video games boil down to for the most part.
I mean, fighting games.
Is crypto a video game?
what's the combo that initiates the perfect execution combo that gives us infinite money?
Under collateralized stablecoins.
That's the
So,
combo.
like, jokes aside, like you could definitely train some AI to make some sequence of calls to various smart contracts and like maybe teach it to make money. I think there are a few papers on this that I haven't read, but interesting idea.
Yeah, well, that's one of my the question about is crypto a video game? Like, I kind of say yes, but like I think the bigger thing is just that one of the reasons that I'm kind of like bullish on crypto in general is just that it's very fun, and like I don't know, it's annoying and frustrating and all of that, but like it is fun, and I think most people who are doing this and spending a lot of time in it generally enjoy the time that they spend shit posting and learning about different new DeFi protocols and stuff.
Yeah,
and so it's like, yeah, everyone loves going to zero. It's a good time. But I do think that there's some amount of like, it's not a video game necessarily, but it is kind of a game to a certain extent. I don't know. What do you think?
I think it's definitely a game. It's more of a choose your own adventure game, and you'll run into any number of the other players that happen to be in the same part of the universe as you. Whether you know them or not, or interact with them or not. And one of the funniest things that I've seen is, MEV bots like sending each other messages to communicate, but whether they're trying to collude or shit talk or whatever the case may be.
Yeah. Oh, I remember wasn't there like one bot who like stopped running and like sent a message to one of the others and it was really a pleasure, like racing you for all these times. Like,
yeah, there was another one that was like, I found your GitHub. Looks like a great start. Like, definitely keep going and you have a bright future ahead of you. Sorry for beating you.
Oh man, that's just like a dark forest that I have not spent any time in. And I wish I was smart enough to, but it feels so like daunting.
Me, like, feels like ignorance is bliss. Like I'm kind of happy I'm not this smart. Like, I don't know.
Yeah. Sometimes I wish I was, a better programmer or had, studied computer science, and was able to like play these latency games. But I kind of have this tendency where I'll get obsessed with a game and I won't think about, is it the right game to be playing or not? And so like, I would venture that a lot of the people that are having extreme success with MEV could, point those talents in, another direction, like founding a protocol. And I understand that's not for everybody. Maybe it's not for me either, but, I think it's good to think about like, what do you get the most joy out of long term?
Game selection is sometimes it's more important than how you play the game.
Honestly, I'm terrible at it. So sometimes I need other people to point me in the right direction. But
yeah,
sometimes I feel like I go down the path of least resistance and then I end up playing the games that were like in front of me in that path. And then I don't think about like, oh, why am I playing this game? It's just like,
that's why the algorithm's so important.
And we need to go back to the control theory so we can do a little controlling of the algorithm for our own self. Like we want the levers in our hand. We don't want the black box.
Well, if the levers are in our hand, are we in charge of our own natural selection as humans? What evolutionary pressures are being exerted on humans today, and how many of them are natural?
Probably most of them are human driven.
We have such an abundance of everything. And then we have the human mind playing tricks on us and getting us into weird games.
Yeah, I don't know.
It's a mind fuck of a question.
Yeah, but that's not like a natural thing though. Well, I guess like attention in of itself is natural, but it's not like a naturally occurring thing outside of like human to human interaction. I feel like all evolutionary things on humans right now or currently are like driven by other humans, and I'm sure I'm wrong. And
I think like culture drives a lot of this, and I have no idea whether that's in the long run going to turn us into the humans from DALL-E and their motorized lazy boys, or into something else. But hopefully not in a brittle direction where something bad happens in the world and there goes humanity. But
yeah, that'd be a bummer.
I mean, we still exist to this point, so that's one data point.
I was listening to Allie really likes getting into like weird like conspiracy theory things, and this one's not really as much of a conspiracy theory, but she was like diving a little bit into like the whole "are we living in a simulation" theory, And I had never heard Elon Musk's take on whether or not we live in a simulation. Had you guys heard it before?
I haven't.
I feel like I have.
So it was pretty interesting and like relatively compelling, but basically his case was that there's like kind of two outcomes, which is that like in a world where like we eventually like either we like society lives long enough to get to a point where we were able to like actually simulate life to the point where it's like believable for us and we wouldn't know that we were in a simulation, or all of humanity dies off before that point. And so it's like either there's like a 100% chance we are in a simulation or like humanity is doomed. And it's like one of the two.
Oh my gosh.
And it's like a pretty dark take. But when you think about it, you're like, maybe he's not wrong. But like the counter is that there is some technological advancement that is like actually impossible that humans could never do. And so humanity is not doomed, but they just can never create a perfect one-to-one simulation. And that's like the one counter to it. But it's like an interesting thing to think about.
Definitely.
Yeah. Like the one that like tripped me up the most was essentially that like, if you like come in with the assumption that a perfect simulation is possible, just like really, really hard, then if you're not living in a simulation, everyone's doomed to die.
I think if we want the simulation to turn out well, it's best if we all believe that it is possible.
Yeah. So we're living in a simulation. That's crazy.
Yeah. How about that?
How about that?
Yeah. Do you guys have any conspiracy theory type of things that you're a proponent of?
Not firm. Like all my opinions are so loosely held, you could probably convince me with like an hour of talking about the counter.
Yeah, I don't have too many. I feel like
I'm not really a conspiracy theorist.
Yeah.
No,
me either. But they're fun to read though. Like I got like a little bit deep into the whole like actual theory behind like 9/11 being an inside job stuff.
That was the first I was going to bring up.
Yeah. And they always seem to like fall apart in weird ways.
it's like a correlation versus causation thing usually.
Yeah.
There's this whole website that I find entertaining. Maybe some of you will find entertaining, but it's called Spurious Correlations. And basically they've, mined as many data sets as they can to find two variables that are like have the highest R squared if you put them next to each other, and then they plot it.
I think I've seen a few of these before.
Yeah. Some of these R squareds are like, a perfect one is 1, and these are like, 0.97, but on the surface have nothing to do with each other.
What are some of your favorites?
I think there's one about like, drowning deaths in America and, number of movies Nicolas Cage released that year.
Deez, do you have your phone on you? Let's pull one up. Let's see it.
I feel like one that comes to mind, I haven't looked at this site, but I think of like
Spurious correlations.
Number of ice cream units being sold and like murder rate going up.
I do feel like I saw one like that or something.
Yeah.
All right. Let's pull it up and let's pick a random one and see if we can make the case for why they should be correlated. And it's not. And it's not.
I like this game.
Oh man. U.S. spending on science, space, and technology.
Okay.
Suicides by hanging, strangulation, and suffocation.
How tightly correlated are we here?
I think we found the techno pessimists.
Yeah, I feel like this one's actually like not that hard to map out.
Am I an idiot, or how do I read the R here? Teach me how to read a graph. Well, I don't see an R variable.
Well, they've updated this since I last looked at it.
The number's just going up. There's no R variable, right? Like I just see the trend.
It's up only?
All right. Per capita cheese consumption.
Okay.
And number of people who died by being tangled in their bed sheets.
Okay. Well, I'm going to say for that one, it's that
Drinking.
You like are really sweaty or something. They're like overweight. No, that doesn't
like
work.
The sweat adds friction to the sheets. And so when you roll over, you get strangled.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Lot of fucking wine drinkers just getting too lit, eating too much cheese in bed.
I feel like
hot and heavy.
Coming up with plausible explanations for these could be its own podcast.
No, I like this.
I think so.
This is a great idea.
Thank you. Can we just talk about the fact that in 2009, almost 800 people died by being strangled by their bed sheets? That is totally insane.
That's such a high number. Like I would have guessed like 12.
Yeah.
Like if you would have asked me.
I'm sure that's more than spider bites or anything else that's easy to imagine.
Yeah.
And therefore scary.
Strangled by your bedsheet.
Does
Like,
that mean during sleep though? Or does that mean like,
are there murders?
or suicide?
It
Well,
just says
like
died by
Jeff- like
becoming
Jeffrey Epstein
strangled
style?
in their
Yeah,
bed sheets.
exactly. Yeah.
That has to cumulatively be all of them, right? Like the murders, suicides, the accidents.
I'm just saying that may be why it's a little.
I mean, how is that in America or is that the world?
Unclear.
Yeah, it doesn't say.
I mean, there's like what 8 billion people or something. So if 800, like, I mean, that's
It still just feels like a lot. I don't know. I guess people put themselves in a lot of instances where they could potentially be strangled by their bed sheets. It's about once a day at least.
well, like I'm thinking like kids, like not
Okay.
adults, but like there's
Yeah.
800 kids that like toddler age, 4 or 5 years old. Parents went to bed. Some shit happened. Like, oh fuck, little Jimmy, what happened? Like he fell off the bed. His head snapped because it got caught in the sheet. Like, I don't know.
That's why bunk beds are dangerous.
So that might be where most of the deaths come from.
His bunk bed.
Bunk bed sold, strangulation by bed.
Yeah,
sheets.
that's a correlation we need to see. This one's kind of fun. It's like close enough where I could see it. Total revenue generated by arcades and computer science doctorates awarded in the U.S. And that just feels like a nerd calculator.
I would feel like the doctorates would be a leading indicator of that.
Mhm.
But at some point you move past arcades as a like technological leading edge.
Yeah, but maybe it's like a nostalgia thing of like
Possible.
way to like people who are getting computer science doctorates probably take like their chill night is playing video games, and so maybe it's like some
They have more money to spend at the arcade because
Yeah.
they're rich too.
also arcades make a
Speaking
lot
of video
money.
games, with the amount of money that people spend on graphics for these things,
Yeah. Like
to
video
me,
games.
maybe this is just me being weird, but I feel like that's highly uncorrelated with how fun the game is. Like, there's a lot of 8-bit
yeah.
games that are just like absolutely fascinating from a
We're just-
strategy perspective, and you don't need the graphics.
Yeah,
We were talking about that with Sobi, like right before this, how the upside in indie games, like Andy rattled off like a dozen indie games that he thoroughly enjoyed and like loved the story of. And it was like, I can't even rattle off that many AAA games that I like that much.
yeah. I feel like story and like gameplay mechanics are significantly more important than graphics.
Mhm.
I think game studios. I think probably if I had to guess, game studios over allocate for them because it works really well for marketing.
Mhm.
Like it's very hard to market like, yeah, our in-game like PvP mechanics are really good, but it's really easy to be like, look at how cool this picture of a gun looks like or whatever. And so I wonder what the correlation would be if you were to like take the like initial sale or like total time played, comparing those things as well, where it's like, you know, the best selling games that have shitty graphics or like our smaller indie games versus like really high selling AAA games that end up not being played very much.
Are you bullish on the future of on-chain games?
I am, mostly just because, well, so I think like the case against them is that all of on-chain is a game. So why do you need to make it actually a game? But I think it's mostly just like creating, I think I'm bullish on the stuff that's creating like novel new interactions that previously didn't exist or are very hard to do in a non-on-chain game or don't make as much sense or aren't as fun. And so I think that kind of stuff is interesting. And then just like having your entire history of playing the game as well be on chain. And like I think the games that really lean into the crypto only things like MEV make those way more interesting.
So like Dark Forest.
Yeah. And stuff like that, or like, it's not really even a game, but like did you see 0x Beans from Twitter made like a game, like an NFT project where if you like had to make a contract that was like the most optimized player, and like you would call a function in his game and you had to like implement some interface and it would sort 10 numbers or find the 3 numbers inside of 10 that added up to.
So it's like a decentralized leaderboard for optimizers.
Yeah. And the way that it worked was if you submitted a code that beat the previous all-time high, you like got to pull an NFT from that user. And so there's like only one NFT that exists that's soul bound, and it's to whoever has the current high score for most optimized contract.
I should think leaderboards are going to be like really powerful dynamics because, you know, if you can incentivize users to play your game and if they can like get bragging rights or reputation from their status on the leaderboard, like maybe you can actually get them to do useful work through the course of that game.
Yeah. Well, it's in a world where more people are anon, which I think long term we will see whether it's founders or not. The value of having social signaling outside of just like someone vouching for you gets like more and more high, right? And so leaderboards are just one more use case of that. And like Dune dashboards.
I mean, you're showing off your coding skills and you're getting an NFT for it. So like it's not a stretch in my opinion for that to be like Code Arena auditors, for example. Where instead of, you know, optimizing a silly game that might not have broad applicability, you're like auditing contracts.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, like even think about in the case of the optimization game, like whoever holds the NFT for being the current optimizer, like probably could get a job in crypto if they wanted to. If they were looking, they could probably find a job. And like you could definitely expand that, like you're saying, to a lot of different fields.
Token gated DMs.
Yeah.
I mean, there is something like that right now. I minted one. It's like a ETH box or like, it's like an ETH mailbox.
Yeah. It's like, you
can set a threshold. So like I can set it so that you need to pay 0.042069 ETH to message me or something like that.
Sounds like earn.com.
Yeah. It's like earn.com all over again.
I think it has a very minimal adoption right now. It's just like very recently deployed experimental thing, but it was interesting enough. All right, fuck it. I got to download one. I feel like I don't know. It feels weird to set that threshold for someone to message me because then I feel like I need to look at it.
Maybe you should auction off, you know, a certain number of your messages per week rather than setting a price.
Well, I saw another thing that was like token gated Calendly, where it was like a shared Calendly style thing, but it was token gated. I think that could potentially be pretty powerful where like, let's say like someone like UD's, if you auctioned off 10, 30-minute slots a week of like calls and you're like, 5 hours a week of my time are basically like up for bidding for the 10 highest bidders. And then you use token gated Calendly.
So you make that in ERC20 instead of, you know, in 1155 with the calendar slot data in it, where you just like have the social contract where you're going to schedule something that week with that person. Yeah,
I guess you could just make it like a NFT that has the times, and you could say like, here are my 10 times, and I'm selling them.
I would I would see something more cool to do with like existing tokens. Like if we did something with like the podcast token and be like, hey, like hour a week, like raffle off this time slot to someone in the podcast family or something like that. Like, I think that'd be cool.
Yeah, well, like,
I feel like I can't get over the hurdle of like just having like a raw listing. Like, oh, this is my 1030 to 11 bid on it. Like,
I think that's just like who you are as a person.
Yeah,
there's definitely
Warren Buffett sells one lunch per year.
Yeah, for
Justin Sun.
Yeah. What if you could talk to Justin Sundays? How much do you think he would pay to talk to you so he could chill USDD to you?
He'd have to pay me a lot.
Yeah,
he'd have to buy my list.
I would do it for free just out of curiosity.
Yeah, I would love to talk to him. Justin.
We'll bring him on the podcast.
Justin, if you want to come on the pod, we're happy to have you. We saw your ad in Times Square while we were walking over here yesterday. I think you'd be a great addition.
Heavily influenced by that ad. We took all of our proceeds and just put it right into TRX.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Not
good
financial
yield.
advice.
But I don't even know how we got to that conversation. But leaderboards. Are there any other examples of leaderboards in crypto or just in general right now that you think also offer like that kind of like high signal? I think one to me is going back to Dune, like the people on like the top Dune dashboard, especially if you see their name multiple times.
Yeah.
If you see that they've made multiple boards, like I've had that a couple times where I'll see someone who shoots me a DM or something, and I've recognized their name from Dune.
Definitely.
Yeah, I look at my high scores are all.
You mentioned DGen score.
Yeah, I look at DGen score, the Nansen stuff, but like I don't really have that many I go to. DGen score to me is the most novel because it kind of takes a mixture of everything, and you're able to bundle a couple wallets in. It doesn't explicitly show the wallets when you share it, even though it's dumb.
I hope they have good terms of service.
I didn't fucking read them.
I doubt it, but
I needed to see the score, dude. You think
yeah.
I was reading
Well, wait. So now we're gonna go off on a tangent here, and you might not even know the answer. Whatever happened to Atomic Blue?
I think they decided that they wanted to go in a different direction.
Yeah, because that's what it was originally, right? Wasn't it like some almost
It
sort of
was like a dex aggregator of some kind, wasn't it?
Yeah, and then they made Degen Score.
Well, so Degen Score was like a token gated game, basically, which was their way of making it exclusive to people with on-chain reputation to try out their new dex aggregator product. I don't know what happened to that product. Maybe they decided to go in a different direction. But I think one guy from that team wound up at Jump Crypto. And, another guy from that team decided that Degen Score was really interesting and actually what they wanted to lean into.
Nice. Yeah. Degen Score 2 is pretty good. Like the updated UI for it and stuff is good. And like we had one guy who applied and we didn't really have like a role for him, but like he was like, hey, here's my Degen Score, and it was very low or very high. It was a double digit Degen Score, and I was like, oh shit, like I 100% would like to have a conversation with you.
No, I like
a good
that.
sign.
I think NFTbank.ai has like different leaderboards for like revenue and spending and stuff based on wallets. Kind of similar to Nansen's.
Nansen has the ones for like NFT trading.
Yeah,
that's pretty good. And so then it's just like Pranksy and everyone else.
It's just picking the KPI that people care the most about and figuring out a way to track it and let people, verify that, they are that entity.
Yeah. I mean, it also works with NFTs too. Like the way that I met Noun22 is that Noun22 DM'd me on Twitter, and I like, I said to him, because he DM'd me, he was like, hey, I'm in Brooklyn. Do you want to get a cup of coffee? And I was like, if you didn't have a noun as, like, if I didn't know that you owned this noun, I would not have said yes. But like, because you own a noun, I will meet you, this random anon person, for a cup of coffee. And like, that's the only time I've ever done that, is meet like a random person I didn't know at all.
Nouns are high signal, I guess, for you.
Yeah. This was a long time ago too, when there were less nouns around, but still pretty high signal.
At least 22 nouns.
Yeah. This was probably in like the 100 or so range.
We're like that at hoodie punks.
Yeah.
But like there's someone at this table that doesn't have a hoodie punk. That's crazy.
It couldn't be me.
Couldn't be us.
Listen, guys.
But like if anyone has a hoodie punk, I'm like, I gotta like talk to you. Like what's up? Like not just any punk. Like if your punk is like stringy hair with like an ass eating beard, like I probably won't talk to you. Like it's actually better for you to just put a picture of your real face than that punk. Like,
what if your real face looks like that punk though?
It probably still better. Like at least you're like good showing it. But yeah, like there's literally people I've blown off because I didn't like their punk. Like I don't know anything about them, but like they messaged me and I just didn't like the punk.
These is the mean girls of NFTs.
I don't know.
I have nothing against stringy hair or moles or any of the undesirable punk traits.
It's something.
You know what? They all trade in the same NFTX pool.
Dude, the dildo-headed, ass-eating ones, just like, who made the decision to fire off $100,000 on that?
This was early in the days of generative art, so
I'm not blaming the artist.
You don't understand. It's from this punk period of time.
Bro, it's very punk time. We just had dildos on our head. Like some people were bald, but they just suction cup right on top. Like I feel like it shows a lot about a person. Like if that is aesthetically like how you want to portray yourself, then like we probably might not vibe. It's like the only thing. Like apes, I don't care. Like if you have a floor ape, whatever. Like it's all the same to me. But it's a specific thing with punks that I just have this. And it's because I spent so much fucking time in the Discord getting to know all these people with different avatars that like I formed this bias.
So this is maybe where we probably disagree most strongly, is that for me, like NFTs are much less about the art and much more about the novelty of what they're trying to do.
Okay.
So I think punks are cool because they pioneered what became the PFP trend, were generative art and an experiment in community formation, right? So that's why I think punks are cool. Not
I think all that too. But like if you're gonna spend $100,000 on a pixel picture and you can spend $110,000 and get something that looks significantly better, and you don't, I'm gonna judge you. Like I don't. That's just how my brain works. I also like for the
there's
people.
There's plenty of aesthetic NFTs at much more reasonable price points.
Yeah, I think that's I get what you mean, Deez. And like, I definitely
Like
I
owning a
value,
punk is aspirational. I
Yeah.
don't want to shit on any punk owner, but like I have this unreasonable bias from when I spent time in the Discord when punks were 3 to 5 ETH, and these people would choose those punks over another punk for like $100 or $200 difference, and it's like a bias that has extrapolated to where we're at.
I
now.
definitely like. I was very picky when I was buying my first couple punks, where I really wanted like the one that I use as my PFP sometimes was like it needs. Well, one, I really wanted it to have an orange beanie. I don't know why. I just like decided that I liked how the orange beanies looked. And then I was like, I don't want it to look like shit. But I do think like, I actually think mine in particular, that is like paid off because it was generally, it wasn't on the floor, but it wasn't that far off of the floor of the kind of the traits that I bought. And I have had multiple people reach out to me and say, I really, really like how your punk looks and I'm willing to pay you more than fair market rate for your punk. Will you sell it to me? And I've said no up until this point, but like,
Well, your punk now has provenance because it was yours.
yeah.
Like your punk is at least 50% premium over floor in my head, just based off the aesthetic premium.
Yeah.
What about the Andy 8052 premium?
I mean, that is a way harder premium to peg a value to. It's really dynamic based on the buyer.
Well, I guess the real question there is how much do you think 4156's ape has a premium for all of its history?
Based on the price that it sold
Did
at,
one confirmation make a good purchase? Is really the question, I guess.
I don't think that there was necessarily a premium.
No, they didn't. There wasn't a premium.
I haven't seen any provenance premiums, I don't
No.
think, in punks.
I think the ape is probably the most extreme example though, because it had a lot of derivative art. Like there's a Beeple that's based on it. There's real artwork out there that is based on this ape that he didn't even commission. And so that's like the one, to me, that's like there's way more provenance there because like the mimetic value of that individual punk is already like somewhat being spread. Whereas like, honestly, who gives a shit that I owned a punk? Like, I don't matter that much. Like, it doesn't really matter. I think like long term, there's like maybe one buyer in the world who's like, wow, Andy owned that punk. That's really cool. And it's like, I guess if you think that over the next 20 years, there will be a lot more people who feel that way, then maybe. But
I think derivative art is really cool. And one of the reasons why I think making things CCO and removing the gatekeeping on it is such a good idea.
Yeah, I totally agree.
And you know my idea too about like the punk bundle, right? Like I have my punk, but I have the Bored Ape honorary and the Toad honorary, the Wizard honorary, whatever. And my whole deal is when I find that one person, whoever the fuck they are, they get everything when they buy the punk for the price that I'm ready to sell it for. So like if they care about the provenance, like I'm giving them all of the provenance.
Do you have the V1 punk?
No, the devs do.
Damn.
I have the proof of work V2 punk.
Yeah. I wonder if the I mean there's people out there who are buying proof of work punks. I don't know.
Did you sell yours yet?
No.
I haven't
What's
sold
the
mine.
floor?
I don't know.
I haven't even like connected to
I
the proof of
assume
work
it's
chain.
like
It's somewhere in between on the spectrum of buying the NFT itself and right click save.
Yeah. But yeah, there's like some weird bundled value there potentially of if NFTs on Tezos are valuable, like I think NFTs on
There's a lot of great artwork on Tezos.
yeah, that's the one difference I think is that the artwork on Tezos is really awesome. But like if you're assuming like if Tezos as a chain can hold value because the artwork is good, and like we've already decided that punks are cool and interesting, then I feel like the proof of work ones should have some sort of value, but probably very little.
yeah, like I'd rather have the V1 punk
Agreed.
on the main chain than like the V2 proof of work punk.
Yeah.
For sure.
I think there's also a different universe where the proof of work fork happens very differently and less like combative, and people feel differently about it, where it's less like where people are more excited about their proof of work NFTs.
Yeah, right now it's like a lot of people either seem confused about like why do they have two? That's the question we got in Twitter Spaces a lot. Like, what do you mean? Like, I'm gonna have like two copies, and it's like, well, you have like this copy that's not really the copy.
I just don't understand why anybody would want to inherit the like burden of Ethereum state, like all of the historical transactions since the beginning of time for your new chain, rather than coming up with some sort of more intelligent way to bootstrap your initial user base.
Yeah, I mean, just the money grab. I'm pretty sure.
We have all this technology that we can't throw out because we were mining, so we need to keep mining.
Yeah, pretty much. We are getting close to time here. And so I do want to ask you, we have one question we ask everyone before we go. And it is, if you had an autobiography about yourself, what would you title it? It's a fun question. You you can think on it for a little bit. These can give you the origin.
I'm going to think on it a little bit. I would love to hear the origin.
Yeah, so I took this question. I was on a podcast and someone asked me this question. And I was like, whoa, like no one's ever asked me this question. I've been doing too many of these podcasts and a lot of them are the same fucking questions. So this is Eshe from the Afropolitan podcast who asked me this. And my answer is a Lindy walk, because I feel like it just sums up my whole life. Like very type B personality, just going with the flow, out in nature, enjoying the journey.
Just being aware of your experience and your surroundings.
Yeah, trying to be present. Yeah.
I would probably call it, it's a low conviction opinion because I'm thinking about this for the first time. Maybe something like, wouldn't it be cool if, because I think that
that's a good one.
If you could prefix most of my thoughts with that, and it would be the right context.
Yeah, no, that's a good one. I like that. Yeah, mine. The more I say it, the more I'm leaning into it. Is fuck it, we ball. Mostly from the side of generally being pretty optimistic and happy to kind of just build the plane while it's flying kind of situation. Awesome. Yeah, I think Lewis is standing up. I don't have my phone, so I have no idea what time it is, but I'm going to assume that it's time to wrap up.
Thanks, Lewis.
Do you have anything that you want to let the world know about, or any bags you need to pump?
I'm generally interested in connecting with people who have interesting ideas. And so I'm sure if you look, you'll be able to find me on Twitter. Well, would love to chat. Hit the DMs.
Will Price, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah, you heard it here first. Slide in his DMs.
Your favorite person's favorite person.
All right. Yeah. Thanks for coming on, and talk to you soon. Bye.
Till next time.